just give a sense of the introduction to I-C3. What do we want to achieve and why we're all here today? So I won't go into the backdrop, but the backdrop is very clear. There's a huge energy by the EU from government to scale the sector, and there's a lot of investment and funding going into various schemes, from pilot lines now to I-C3, which is what we're here today. These are billion-euro investments, and it aligns with the government strategy. We've all seen it, and their strategy is very much, you could see at the bottom, foster the future growth of our semiconductor ecosystem. That's the key driver we're trying to achieve. And in fact, I think you'd all have seen, even the British Prime Minister visited Tyndall recently to find out everything that's happening here. So the objective really is very simple, and we're going to show you some data in a minute about where the sector is today. So the objective is we want to create more companies and we want to scale the existing companies. So it's the role of the primarily universities to create those companies, and we have a healthy fund of companies in Tyndall, and we hope to have more the next couple of years. Same with in NovaUCD and across the university ecosystem. So that part of the system is well supported by EI, and we have the companies coming through. The challenge we're seeing now is how do we help them scale? We don't want just small startup companies that tread water. We want them to scale to do like Equal1 and Embryonics in Galway. And how do we achieve that is primarily their challenges around funding, training, and how do we access the pilot line facility, and hence the reason for having I-C3. The partners should call out to obviously Tyndall are the host. We partner heavily with MIDAS, NovaUCD and MCCI, and thank you again to both Enterprise Ireland and the EU for funding the activity. So our initial plan are to do 4 activities. It's the same 4 activities as the 20 or so competence centres across Europe. It's primarily about how do we access the wider European support, such in design centre, in pilot line manufacturing, but also how do we help companies get funding and also training? How do we advance the skills needed in the staff? So what we decided to do is, before we going off and creating detailed activities, we wanted to engage with the population to find out what you guys need most. So rather than us creating something we think is needed, we want to get your inputs, and hence the format of the meeting today. So where we are, we've hired the team, the initial team of 4, and you'll get to meet them a bit later. We've started to do customer engagement, and primarily John again has been doing an outstanding job bringing the community together, raising awareness of I-C3 and getting everybody to here today, and we're starting to building services out. But the main thing I think is the purpose of today is we want to bring you into the room and saying we wanted to do like any startup companies do, is customer discovery. So we want to figure out what are the needs of our startup companies at different stages. Some having just formed, maybe looking for initial investment, seed investment, others looking to scale. And there's great opportunities out there, but some of them need a lot of knowledge to access. For example, here we have the new IPK in semiconductors coming shortly, important project common European interest, where companies can get significant funding. And what we're hearing is there are 4 of the Irish SMEs who are participating in that program and hope to get significant funding over the next year of that. Now, some of those programs are fantastic, but they need a lot of knowledge how to access them. And again, that's where the supports of I-C3 would kick in the future. How do we help you support, get access to that funding to scale? And so, but before we jump into it, I thought the challenge is going to be, as we move forward, how do we measure success? And success being the number of companies we have, indigenous semiconductors we have, and the scale of those companies. So Marinez in my team did a quick analysis for us last year, and because we can only know if we're moving the system forward if we have a benchmark. And so what we decided to do is just, when we did the exercise, we wanted to focus on true semiconductor companies, and so we kept it quite narrow and following some of the many maps you'd see out there. And what we identified, what Marinez identified, were 77 companies employing about 3,300 employees. So already a significant activity, but obviously one that we want to scale. And I know we would have heard from others like John saying the sector, they believe at the moment is already 20 to 30,000 employees. So it's probably around 10% or less of the total employment in the semiconductor sector. So what we want, and you can see the list of the companies there, and most of those will consider themselves to be deep semiconductor companies. What I mean by that is they're selling, they're sales cycle is into the semiconductor sector, while we have a couple of others in medical devices, aerospace, etc. And so what we also did was a quick analysis of the companies themselves. So you can see here that most of them, 70%, over 70% were formed within the last 20 years, and more than 70% are 50 employees or less. So that's our start point where we are today. And what we're committed to in Tyndall is we're going to do that analysis every year and update it. So the interesting thing we've to find out is when we come back next year, have we increased the number of companies? Have we helped the current company scale? And if we track that every year, then we can look to the supports that hopefully will have made them scale. And that will feed back 360 saying, what should we do next year, the year after, etc. One of the challenge I would say from my perspective sitting in Tyndall is, while it's great to get I-C3 and other initiatives out there, most of these initiatives are they're short term. They're typically 3 or 4 year awards. And the problem we have is when you're trying to create a spin-out company, typically they're 4 or 5 years incubating university if they're semiconductor based, and they might be 4 or 5 years before they're making traction afterwards. And so if you have a funding cycle or support schemes that run for 3 years or so, then actually it's quite piecemeal. So one of the challenges we've got to do is saying, how do we build a sustainable support ecosystem for companies, not just one where we have a great time and we support companies the next 3 years, but then it all disappears afterwards. So that's one of our challenges behind the scenes as well. So with that, I'm going to finish up and just saying, then again, just to highlight, we wanted to make this interactive because we do want to get your feedback in as to what we should do best that can support you. And that's, while the event here is focused on funding, there are any other areas of support as well. So we talked about training, access to pilot lines. So please bring the feedback in, and we'll meet the other team a bit later and come and speak to us anytime, because we're really interested to hear your thoughts on how we scale the sector going forward. Thank you.